Today, we're getting under the hood of women's health with Ellyn, the author of the best-selling book, Flat Please Hold the Shame, and co-creator of AskEllyn.ai. Ellyn will be getting under the hood of breast health. Why is breast health an important topic for women?
From the time we are, in adolescence, we are developing our breasts. They are an important part of our body. They are, there for sexual pleasure. They are an erogenous zone. They are there to nourish our children if we are breastfeeding. And they are also subject to disease. So breast cancer actually affects many, many women, 1 in 8 women. And it is something that we have to be aware of. So it's really vitally important that all women be breast aware and think about their breast health.
What does it mean to be breast aware, and why is it important?
Breast aware, and that's the term that doctors like to use, is really to be conscious of that part of your anatomy and to know whether there's any changes that take place. So we're all really familiar, you go through your period and your breasts will get tender and they'll swell, or you get pregnant and your breasts will become tender. That's one of the first indicators that you are pregnant. I certainly found that with myself. And then, in those times when we are not on our period or not pregnant, our breasts are, pretty and beautiful and fill in our tops and our bras. But it is really important that we know that those breasts can change and to pay attention to the many different signals that they're sending us that may indicate that there is something wrong. And so, often when, we think of breast health, we think of breast cancer. And the first thing that comes to mind is if I feel a lump, that is what is going to drive me to go to see the doctor. But there are many, many other signals that your breasts may be developing a disease. So it might be redness. It might be an orange peel-like effect. There might be discharge coming from your nipples, or your nipples might be inverted. And so paying attention to your body and knowing you're normal is so fundamentally important to our health. And paying attention and seeing those signals and getting checked and getting attention, because if it is breast cancer and you catch it early, you're going to be in a much, much better position when it comes to treatment and survival.
How often should you perform breast self-exams, and what should we be looking for?
Yeah. So, they say, the standard is, and you'll see it in the breast cancer community because we all start to yell about it at the first of the month, is at least once a month, you should be doing a self-exam of your breasts. Quite honestly, you're in the shower or the bathtub every day. There is nothing. You're probably washing that part of your anatomy. And so I would say that, doing a self-exam is something you could literally do daily if you wanted to. And the things to look for, again, it's definitely a lump or some kind of change, if you feel anything. And by the way, that lump might be appear in your clavicle or into your armpit. It doesn't have to be necessarily just in the breast itself. I want you to look for changes in discolorization. So if you have some redness, many people believe that breast cancer doesn't hurt, but often it does present as a soreness in that area. And so pay attention to that. Pay attention to an orange peel, so some kind of a texture change, or your nipple may be inverted, or maybe there's some discharge that's coming from it. All of these are warning signals. There are actually 12 different types of warning signs that you need to pay attention to. And there's an organization called Know Your Lemon, and they actually have a graphic that will give you those specific examples. So, that's a really good reference point that you can use when you're doing your self-exams.
What are the most common warning signs of breast cancer?
Certainly a lump, and feeling that. So any kind of change that you feel. And it can be tricky to spot. So when I actually had my breast cancer, I didn't actually feel a round, like a sort of a change in texture, a hard lump. I actually felt a large, almost an olive feeling lump that appeared under my areola. And interestingly enough, as we went further and examined that, that was actually a breast lobe that had been pushed out. And what was really breast cancer, which I didn't even feel and my doctor didn't feel, was just a thickening, like just a sort of an area of density, that it wasn't until a surgeon ran his hands over my breast that he actually was able to identify that that was the cancer. So it can be tricky. So, don't disregard anything. It might be redness. It might be some dimpling. It might be an inverted nipple. It might be some discharge. And I've heard women say, oh, I had this inverted nipple and I didn't think anything of it. Well, that's a warning sign that you should be going to see your doctor. And you know what? Even if it's nothing, and 85% of lumps are completely benign and nothing, still get it checked because you just don't know. And the quicker that you can find any kind of cancer and the quicker that you can treat it, the better you are going to fare.
What are dense breasts and why is it important to understand this?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of talk of late about breast density, and it's something that hasn't really been discussed in the past. So about 50% of women have what's called dense breasts, which means that essentially, anatomically, that you have more glandular tissue than you do fat. And the reason that that is important to know is if you go for a mammogram, and the only way you can actually assess your breast density is to go for a mammogram, is that mammogram cannot see cancer, because what happens when your breasts are dense, it shows up on the imaging as basically a big snowball. And cancer also shows up as a snowflake. And so try to find a snowflake in a snowstorm, and it's almost impossible, even for an expert eye of a radiologist. And so if you have dense breasts, and by the way, in the United States now, it is now required that if you go for a breast scan, that you will be informed of your breast density. And there's different degrees of breast density. So if you have a C or D level of density, you should be getting a supplemental ultrasound or sonogram. So it is essential. Now, why don't we just go to a sonogram right away? Well, that's hard too, because a mammogram gives you a picture of your entire breast. The sonogram is more directed. So if there's an area of suspicion, then they will go in with the sonogram. But know that if you do have dense breasts, you really do need to be requesting. And if your doctor's not defaulting to that right away, then you need to advocate for yourself and ask for that sonogram or ultrasound.
What age should women start getting mammograms and how often?
So it has been historically that in the United States, well, actually across North America, that women have started screening for their breast health at the age of 50. And that has been sort of over the last decade, that has been, the standard. It has just recently changed. So the FDA has just come out with new guidance, and many of the provinces in Canada have also come out with similar guidance that breast screening is now going to start at 40 instead of 50. And the reason for that is because, unfortunately, women are presenting at a younger age with breast cancer. We don't know why. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of why that's happening. Is it environmental factors? Is it alcohol consumption? We don't know. Doctors don't know, essentially. But they do know that, by screening people earlier, they can catch those cancers earlier. And so you will now be screened at the age of 40. We still have an issue with women, choosing not to go get screened. And that's another problem that we need to solve for. So we really need to be getting word out to women that they should be starting screening at 40, that mammograms are not this horrible, awful thing that that some folks tell you. It's really quick in and out, and they do everything they can to make you as comfortable as they can. It's not a big deal. And they need to be going and getting regularly checked. So it should be every 2 years that you're getting screening. Now, there are certain health plans in the United States that allow for you to go and get screened at any point. And if you're looking at your health insurance, there are certain health programs where they don't even require you to be the age of 40. They'll just do a breast screening if you request it. So, those are the important things that you need to know.
What are the risk factors for developing breast cancer?
You know, this was a surprise to me when I developed breast cancer because interestingly enough, before I was diagnosed, I thought I'd take one for the team. I got this research report that came to the house and it asked if I would do a genetic test. And one of the requirements was that you had not had breast cancer. So I thought, I'm going to do it. I'll spit into the tube. Meanwhile, as I submit for this thing, um, I find the lump and I'm actually diagnosed. And it was kind of ironic because the research team came back to me for a follow up. And at this point, I had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And they said, you know what? Your risk was moderate. So this is the myth. We believe, and I think doctors perpetuate this, unfortunately, is that if you don't have a family history, you're in the clear. You are not at risk of breast cancer. Well, that is not true. Over 85% of breast cancers have no family history at all. So, maybe we'll find in time as they do more genetic work that maybe there's genes that we're not aware of, but it's idiopathic. It's just, you just develop breast cancer. And that was my case. I had no family history of it at all. And so everybody's at risk. If you are a woman and you have breasts, you are at risk for breast cancer.
What are the latest advancements in breast cancer detection, screening, and treatment?
So the gold standard is still a mammogram and still getting screened, every year, every 2 years, depending on what's available to you. And if you are high risk, by the way, if you do have some kind of family predisposition toward breast cancer, then you should be getting screened annually. So, there's a ton of really cool advancements that are happening. There's a lot of innovation that is taking place in this space. One of the things that really excites me is, the use of artificial intelligence. And the way that's getting applied in breast screening is many of the mammogram manufacturers now have AI capabilities that actually do what they call image enhancement. So they're taking all of these different mammogram reports and they're applying artificial intelligence to them. And what it's giving radiologists is superpowers. So they're able to spot those cancers really, really early because the technology can go beyond even the most expert eye. You're still going to need the radiologist, obviously, but it's going to give them another sort of level of detection. And in fact, in the UK right now, the NHS has just launched a pilot study where they're going to be using AI for image enhancement specific to breast health. And so again, if you can catch that cancer at its earliest possible stage, everything is easier. You may still have to have surgery, but it's going to be a minor thing. You're not going to have the same kinds of treatments that, many women with more advanced stages of breast cancer require. And so that's really cool. And then there's all kinds of other things that are being done. There's, companies that are working on technologies that will use your breath to actually, like, you'll breathe into a tube and it will do analysis of your breath and actually help to detect whether you are, developing breast cancer or not. And there's also work being done with showing some very interesting results around a breast cancer vaccine. And so, I'm hopeful that maybe, as my daughter, enters into, a mature stage where she's needing screening, maybe there'll be a vaccine just similar to the HPV vaccine where we can eradicate, breast cancer completely. That would be really cool.
What resources or tools have been most helpful in managing your condition?
Oh, so I always recommend. So if a woman comes to me that's been newly diagnosed, it is, you are in shock and you really probably haven't thought about breast cancer at all, right? So that's just the baseline. And you're now plunged into this world and having to make decisions very quickly about your health and what your body's going to look like, and they're talking this new foreign language to you. Like I always kind of joke and say like the lingo of breast cancer, it's like walking into Starbucks and everybody's talking about their grande frappuccino with two whips and a pump, and you're just like you're hearing this ER, PR, and HER2 positive and triple negative and all this language that the doctors are using. And so I always recommend a book to women, and it was incredibly useful to me. It's called Dr. Susan Love's Breast Book. It's now in its, I think it's in its sixth edition. And it was written by Dr. Susan Love. She's now deceased, but she was a breast cancer surgeon herself. And it's considered to be the definitive Bible of breast cancer. And so I always recommend that because it will take you from what is breast cancer? What does the breast anatomy look like through to, what does the breast cancer surgery look like? And what are the treatment options and everything else? And what I found was, in reading that book, it's a bit of a slog. It's a lot to get through, but it equipped me to be able to have conversations with my doctors, to be able to understand what they were saying, speak this new language, and hold my own in the conversations with these doctors. Because I think if you sort of hide under, put your head in the sand and you hide away and you don't sort of face what's going on with you, in terms of the risks for your breast health, even if it turns out to be again nothing, you can be, I use this word, with all the due respect, but you can be victimized by the system. You can find yourself swept up into some decisions that, you don't understand, or, you sort of lose that opportunity to advocate for yourself. So, so that's a resource. I mean, the Know Your Lemons. I mean, if we want to just talk about breast health, not just breast cancer, Know Your Lemons is a great reference point because it's so simple. It's so easy. It's basically a graphic poster. And and the reason she used lemons is because not every culture feels comfortable with representing and seeing breasts, right? So, it's great because it's just this really, sort of visual reference of the things that you should be looking for when you're doing a self-exam. And then there's, lots of other, information out there. There are websites that are devoted to breast density, both in the US and Canada. So those are also really good resources so that what you're looking for and what to ask about.
How do hormonal changes like menopause, pregnancy affect breast health?
Well, I mean, I think we all have, experienced having our periods. And, that's really, I mean, at the end of the day, your breasts exist because they are there to produce milk, to feed our young. That's what it's all about. And so, they're made up of fat and glands. And, it's really those hormonal changes to our body, whether they're, puberty and you're getting your period, or whether you're pregnant, or whether you're going through menopause. It's all estrogen, and it's estrogen that's coursing through your body, and your breasts are responding to that. So when your breasts swell and are tender, that's because your milk glands inside your breasts are essentially going, wow, okay, we're getting ready to, for this individual to become pregnant, and we're going to produce milk. And so that's really what's going on. And it's really funny, I mean, I never really thought about my breast anatomy or even looked at breast anatomy before all this. And it's really quite fascinating. They're actually quite, if you sort of look at a cross section of the breast, it's really quite a beautiful thing. It almost looks floral. And, the same thing happens in menopause. It's, your estrogen is now declining. And so, there's, things get less plump and droop a little bit more. And, there's a lot of dryness that takes place when you start losing estrogen out of your body. So, all these things again are sort of come to the, if you understand what's going on with your body and why these changes are happening and, what's going on anatomically, it just makes you more in tune with yourself. And, again, back to this sort of idea of being breast aware, it's just, they're important. It's important information that you should be paying attention to.
Share actionable tips to help women stay proactive about their breast health.
So first and foremost, do those self-checks. Know you're normal. As I said, it's so easy. You're in the shower every day. And, I tell you why this is so important, because I always did self-checks. And I actually always went for my mammograms. I had a baseline when I was 40. I had a doctor that was very forward thinking and, said, let's do a baseline. And then from the time I turned 50, in Canada, that's when it started. I, went every 2 years for my mammograms. I never put it off. I was always, good about going. And my last mammogram was in 2019 in December, and it was perfect. There was no concern at all. 2 years later, in March of 2022, I had three nodules of breast cancer in my left breast, one of which after surgery was 4.5 centimeters. And if I hadn't been doing my self-check, now I did have a mammogram booked, in fact. And in fact, what they did was they turned my sort of screening mammogram into a diagnostic mammogram because in the interim I had found the lump. But the point is, cancer, depending on the grade, can develop quite quickly. And if you are putting it off, if you have even a small lump and you put it off, suddenly that lump can very quickly become a large lump and you are into some deep trouble, And so I think it's really important that we be always paying attention and going for those screenings and doing those self checks in between. That's just critical as far as I'm concerned.